Christian Calgie is a senior reporter at Guido Fawkes live with us. Morning, Christian.
Morning.
Do you think there are more to come, or is this Downing Street getting a grip on things?
Well, I mean, you've got to separate out the sort of the policy unit sphere and, the rest of the resignations we saw last night. Undoubtedly, there are people in the policy unit whose loyalty lies with Munira Mirza and not necessarily with the Prime Minister. I don't know how many of those there are. There may be a couple more left to come. But in terms of the senior resignations, I presume last night was all we're going to get for the time being.
And there's been chatter no end that the Prime Minister really needs to fear, a cabinet minister resigning, or Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss resigning and challenging him. How damaging are resignations at the other end of the ledger of a constant sort of drip of officials?
Yeah, I mean, a cabinet minister resignation would be very damaging. Indeed, I think it's one of the things that is keeping the 54-letter threshold with Graham Brady at bay, is that backbenchers are not yet seeing the kind of ministerial discontent that we saw under Theresa May, and that fort is holding. Now, of course, that is partly because Boris Johnson has filled the cabinet with very close allies, other than potentially some of the comments we're seeing from Rishi Sunak. But yeah, I agree, that would be pretty damaging indeed.
Of course, we do know via the Times this morning that the Solicitor General, Alex Chalk, had to be persuaded by the Prime Minister not to quit over Downing Street parties. So do you think on the sort of political front, in terms of his own ministers, the Prime Minister is on top of things at the moment, or should he still have worries?
Well, I mean, the other thing you've got to consider is there's only a very short window of time left for people to resign, because we are expecting a reshuffle imminently, as promised by MPs, and I wouldn't be surprised if that did come very shortly. I think the political situation is obviously volatile, but at the same time, there's two different very spheres of opinion here. There's one which is, let's be honest, sort of us out in the bubble watching from the outside, and there's what's the knowledge on the inside. And the nerves seem to be, actually, when you talk to people who are involved in talking to MPs and trying to keep them on side, the nerves are substantially lower there. And as long as Downing Street can emphasise to ministers and senior backbenchers, actually, give us a month, give us a few weeks, let's get replacements for these people, just wait and see that we can steady the boat and then make a decision, then Boris Johnson might be able to navigate a route through this issue.
And how easy a job or difficult a job is that? Gavin Barwell, former Chief of Staff in Downing Street, was telling us earlier on that these 4 jobs, the first 4 that went, are the 4 most important jobs in Downing Street. If there's a whiff of a sinking ship, is any talent going to want to fill those positions?
Well, you'd hope talent will be filling those positions. I mean, my argument at the moment, and it's not very popular, but the resignations yesterday, they're not good for the Prime Minister in the sense that he's now got all this chaos around him that we need to try and quieten down. But, the people in those positions were not necessarily good in those positions. I mean, Munira Mirza, yes, she'd been very close to the Prime Minister for 14 years, but backbenchers, ministers I've spoken to have said things like they never once met her, she wasn't in touch with the Tory parliamentary party, and that was creating this rift between the MPs and Downing Street. Rosenfield was basically a disaster from the get-go. And talking about Gavin Barwell, I actually think, after the 2017 election, when Theresa May's 2 Chief of Staffs stood down and Barwell came in, despite the lack of a majority and the difficulties navigating Brexit, the Downing Street operation worked a lot better. So actually, out of the chaos of Theresa May's post-election period, installing someone who knows the parliamentary party, who is trusted by the party, who is competent at administration, can give prime ministers an extra couple of years in the job that they otherwise wouldn't have been afforded. And that is what Boris Johnson needs to be praying for when he starts the recruitment drive.
Christian, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks for your time. That's Christian Calgie, senior reporter at the Guido Fawkes website.
Brendan, good evening to you.
Good evening, John.
Hi, Brendan. Can I just start with some of the politics revolving, swirling around Downing Street first? So a big resignation, and it was a big resignation. Munira Mirza, very close to the Prime Minister, senior advisor to Boris Johnson. She was unhappy with his conduct and she's gone. And now we know that Jack Doyle, head of comms, is resigning too, not in the same circumstances or the same atmosphere. But tell me, Brendan, do you think the wheels are coming off?
Not really, John. I think there's going to be a shake-up anyway, so I think it could be part of that, really. Obviously, I think the Prime Minister also confirmed precisely what he meant with the statement. I've been saying the same thing. When you lead an organisation, of course, you do take ultimate responsibility for it, and it's quite right you apologise when things don't go well for that organisation. That it applies whether you're the Prime Minister, the Director of Public Prosecutions, or whether you're in a supermarket or a small business. It's the same for everybody.
Except that his former top advisor clearly wasn't happy. She felt that he hadn't undone or unsaid what he'd said. He hadn't apologised, and he should have done.
Well, I don't think he should apologise, John. I think, again, the point he was making was a fair one, not a personal insult or anything like that. It's just the wider point. And, of course, the Prime Minister's been taking responsibility with the investigation that's been going on. It's not an investigation into the Prime Minister, of course. It's a wider one. But he took responsibility for that. He's apologised for that. And he's obviously that's what he's doing now. Okay, some people may be happy. As I said, people do leave their positions for all sorts of reasons. But what I would do is I've obviously thank Munira for the work that she has done. She's done some excellent stuff. I particularly, as a Red Wall MP, I liked a lot of the anti-woke stuff and pushing back against that, which I thought she did a great job in. So I'd like to wish her well with that. And of course, one of my new intake colleagues, Andrew Griffith, with a big promotion, which is fantastic to see as well.
Yeah, and so you don't buy the idea that the Prime Minister is on the brink. There's a journalist that you probably know and respect, Chris Hope at the Telegraph. I mean, no enemy to the Conservative Party. He's hearing word that, well, maybe the number of letters that are piling up demanding a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister could be within single figures of getting to 54. That triggers the vote. Does the atmosphere feel at all like that to you?
I'd say it's quite the opposite, John. I think over the last couple of weeks, really, we've noticed things calming down a little bit. I don't think there were that many letters in the first place, but what I've actually
Well, we don't
seen
know that, do we, Brendan? None of us know that.
No, we don't, and it's kept as a tight secret by Sir Graham Brady, of course. Always has been and always done in a very professional way. But what I have seen is colleagues coming out saying that actually they're prepared to back the Prime Minister. People that we thought had submitted letters before have said that they've withdrawn them. The Prime Minister gave a really, really great speech to the parliamentary party that explained a lot of things. There's a lot of contrition shown for things that hadn't quite worked out, but then a way forward as well. And I think most of the parliamentary party, certainly the vast majority, are behind him.
All right, let's park that there for the moment. What about the package set up by the Chancellor earlier in the day, Brendan? Were you happy with that?
Yes, I was. I think obviously Ofgem have come out and said that the price cap's going to be lifted. That could be up to £700, and that's incredibly difficult. And Labour's solution, they suggested cutting VAT. For some people, it's £1 a week, or it could be no more than about £90 a year. That's not really going to be enough. So I think it needed something a little bit more. So the Chancellor's obviously come with this 3-point plan. There's the £200 that's going in there that can be repaid, that will help with that large cost. There's the £150 coming off council tax if you're band A to D. And I think the helpful thing about that, people always look at the lowest earners, but it's always those as well that are just about managing some of the middle earners as well. Yes. And this will benefit those too. So far better than the regressive national insurance, the regressive VAT thing that Labour were looking at. And I think this is a fairly comprehensive plan.
Yes, and in fairness, not every disagreement is a crisis. When it comes to fiscal policy, it is in the nature of things that people should disagree. But a number of your colleagues, leave aside Labour for a moment, but on your side of the House of Commons, there are a number of colleagues who would like to see a VAT removed from energy bills, aren't there, that would like to see the national insurance rise cancelled?
Absolutely. And I suppose from an ideological point of view, the only reason that we can actually do that VAT reduction if we wanted to is because we left the European Union, which the opposition were against. So it'd be great to do that. It would be great to cut national insurance. Yeah. Obviously, that was in our manifesto as well. I like to see small state, low taxes, as we all do.
Well, as you say, Brendan, so it was in your manifesto. Boris Johnson promised that it would be done. It was one of the benefits to look forward to of leaving the European Union. And now we're told it can't be done. It's as clear a broken promise as you could possibly imagine. It's quite hard to defend that, isn't it?
I think in this particular case, John, we're looking at it in the context of the rising cost of energy bills, and would that really make a difference to that? Now, for the £2 billion that's going to costs, I don't particularly need a reduction in my energy bills, but I know there are other people who do. So there are far better ways of doing that than that VAT cut. But what I'd also say about the national insurance increase, nobody saw COVID coming. We use things like the furlough scheme, the grants there to keep the economy going, to save jobs and so on. And that's got to be paid for somehow.
Yeah.
But there's also 6 million people on waiting lists trying to get to see a doctor. There's the social care issue, which of course was in the manifesto. We promised to sort that as well. And really, again, that's got to be paid for. Now,
Yeah.
if somebody can come to me and they can find that sum of money from somewhere else, and we can cut national insurance, then that's wonderful. But so far, nobody's been able to do that.
Well, here's one idea, Brendan, which is to put a windfall tax on the big energy companies. You've got Shell announcing what they call a momentous year and profits amounting to $17 billion. Now, that looks like a potential area for a windfall tax. We've seen windfall taxes imposed in the past.
We have, yes. I think it's worth bearing in mind this idea that we don't tax these big companies at all is a little bit false as well, John. They pay corporation tax, they pay a very high rate of that, and we also get a fair income to the exchequer through that. So it's very difficult. We know that the wholesale price of energy is what's causing a lot of the problem, and it's about addressing that, which is a long-term issue, unfortunately. So we're invested in new renewables, new nuclear, and so on. But of course, it's the here and now that we need to do something about. But I don't think a windfall tax is really the way to do that. I think there's a number of things that we can do, and that's what the Chancellor's outlined today. But certainly the windfall tax, putting VAT in there, I think is the wrong way of going about it.
Brendan Clark-Smith. Thank you, Brendan Clark-Smith, the Conservative MP for Battlesore.